Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining our webinar about the 5 things we wish we knew about blogging. I'm Shravanthie and I'm the co-founder of Aventurine 18, which is our lifestyle blog where we discuss all things entrepreneurship, adventure, and then from September at university as well. So we started our blog at the beginning of our gap year last September. So we've had our blog for 7 months now, and we've gathered lots of tips that we want to share with you. So if you have any questions throughout, feel free to put them in the chat box as we'll be doing a Q&A session at the end. And before we get into the blogging tips, Jennifer's just going to talk a little bit about our young enterprise experience.
Hi everyone, so I'm Jennifer and I'm the other founder of Aventurine 18. So we thought it'd be nice just to start the webinar talking a bit about our young enterprise experience because, as Danielle mentioned, it's how me and Shrav became friends because we were in the same team. So we both took part in 2019 when we were in year 12 and our company was called Teas and Coffee, and we sold t-shirts made from 100% recycled materials and also reusable coffee cups. And in terms of our roles in the company, I was the company secretary, but I also assisted a bit in the marketing by setting up and managing the Twitter account. And then Shravanthie was the sales director. And then in terms of these photos, so just on the bottom, this is a photo from us at the first competition. And you can see Shravanthie and I in the middle there. And then the photo on the right is of our trade stand at regional finals. So you can see our coffee cups in the front and then our t-shirts in the back. Next, we just really wanted to share this because this was our first introduction to the world of blogging, and it was actually during an enterprise. So as I mentioned, I ran the Twitter account and we had a blogger reach out to us who wanted to write a blog post all about our company, and which was really great because it gave us a first insight into the world of blogging, and it was also really good for promotion. So we just wanted to share that because it shows how Young Enterprise really had a big influence on where we are today with starting our blog. So now Shravanthie is just going to get into the 5 things we wish we knew about blogging.
Okay, perfect. So the first thing that we wish we knew about blogging is to start with a niche and then expand. We sort of did the opposite, where we started very broad with things like recipes and gift guides and personal statement tips, and we only just narrowed it down to our 3 main categories. It's good to start with a niche because it will give you a focus for your content, which will help you attract your target audience. And in turn, you'll be able to maintain your audience and grow. So then it's as you grow that you can really begin to expand and introduce new categories. But to begin with, stick with a few so your audience know the sort of content they can expect from your site. So to give you an example, one of our blog categories is going to be university. So things like student on a budget series, what you need to take to university, freshers tips, that kind of thing. And our target audience is obviously 18 to 25-year-olds, so people who are going to university or are thinking about going to university. So by making lots of university-related content, we'll be able to attract that audience. For a lifestyle blog, it can be quite difficult to find a niche because there's so much you can talk about. So here are some tips of finding your niche. So answer these questions. What content do you like consuming the most? Because it's really important that you find making the content enjoyable. It will make the longevity of your blog, it will make it more successful, basically. Also, think about who your target audience is going to be and what kind of things might they like to read about or what's kind of useful for them. Also, a very important thing to think about is what area would you be able to make the most significant contribution in? Because obviously the posts that you're putting out should be original, and that the blog market is so saturated that you really need to be making a stand and putting your own input in there. Also, take inspiration from what's happening in your own life. Are you a student? Are you a small business owner? Do you like to travel? So can those questions help you to find your niche? So use a thesaurus or dictionary to research things related to your content. And you can always expand later. That's the beauty of having a blog being able to grow, is that you can start off with your niche, but when you find other things you like talking about, you can definitely expand there once you've got your audience. So the next thing we wish we knew is all the technical aspects of starting a blog. There's quite a lot to it actually, but we've tried to keep it as simple as possible. And we just wanted to explain a few key terms that you'll come across and that you need to know for starting your blog. Also, we've popped a link in the chat box of a guide we found really useful to understand the technical aspects. So here they are. We're going to use an analogy of a house to explain the three main parts of your website. So first, you've got your domain. So if you think about your website as a house, then the domain is your address. So it's what people type in the browser URL bar to get to your website. So our domain name is www.aventurine18.com. So think about whether you want a .com, a .org, a .co.uk. So these are all things you can decide, and also check that your domain is available because no one else can have your address. The next thing is the web host. So the web host is the house itself. It's where your website lives. So the role of the web host is to allow individuals and organizations to make their website accessible via the World Wide Web. So without it, you can't make your website public. We used Bluehost for our blog and we would really recommend them. It made things a lot easier. And lastly is our blogging platform. Now, this is the person that lives inside your house. So the blogging platform provides the tools to actually create your website. So we used WordPress as our blogging platform, which is the most popular, but we just want to make you aware, if you're going to go down that route, that there is a difference between WordPress.org and WordPress.com. So WordPress.org is where you can have a self-hosted site. It's what we have, and it means you can have complete control over your website. So you can put ads on it and things like that. And there are other, whereas in WordPress.com, you can't do all those things. So make sure you have a look and really do your research before picking your blogging platform. So there are other blogging platforms. We use WordPress, there's Squarespace, Wix, Medium. So again, make sure you really do your research, as that's going to give you the tools you need to actually build your website.
Okay, so the last technical aspect we really wanted to talk about is SEO, and this stands for Search Engine Optimization. Now, we didn't know about SEO until a couple of months into starting our blog, but it's really important to keep in mind when writing your blog posts and designing your site. So basically, it increases the visibility of your website on search engines such as Google, so you rank higher, because like nobody really goes on the second page, so you want to be on that first page and as close to the top as possible, so people find your blog posts. So we really recommend the Yoast Seo Plugin. And so plugins are sort of add-ons to enhance your website that you can use on WordPress. And Yoast Seo is really good because it has a sort of traffic light system when you're writing a blog post. So it will tell you to include like more subheadings, to write shorter sentences and things like that, just to make your site fully optimized for Google so that you rank higher. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the second point, which is the second thing we wish we knew about blogging. So for your blog, along with a niche, you'll need a name. And quite honestly, we spent weeks trying to find a name, probably even a month, just because we really wanted it to be perfect. But what we really wish we knew, particularly at that time when we were really struggling to come up with a name, is that you shouldn't worry too much about your blog name. It's more about making a name for yourself. So I'll just explain that a bit more. So because blogging is sort of a very visual, content-driven platform, it's more your content that's going to make you stand out than your name. So if you think about like the really popular magazines, which are sort of similar to blogs magazines are, like Vogue, Elle, things like that, their name isn't really like really standoutish, but it's their content that's made them really where they are today. But we do still want to give you a few tips for how to decide on your blog name. So firstly, choose a name that gives you some flexibility. So unless you're really set on your niche, for example, you really want to write a cooking blog and that's all you want to focus on, then it's okay to use something like Baking with Jenny. But unless that's what you're doing, choose a name which will be suitable for whatever sort of content you want to make. So to begin with, think really long term about your content. So for example, with us, we started a blog in our gap year, but even though we were writing a bit about gap year content, come September we'll be in university. So we want our blog name to sort of go with us with whatever we write about. And secondly, give it time. So as I mentioned, it took us weeks to come up with a name, but it's really worth taking the time so that you're really confident and happy with what you've got. And also we found that when we stopped putting pressure on us to find a name, ideas started flowing a lot more freely. And then thirdly, make sure your name is right for you. So you don't have to pay attention to all the advice you read or hear, because your name has got to be like perfect for you. So for example, when we were researching how to come up with a blog name, we saw a lot which said about having something really short, really easy to spell, and then we ended up with Aventurine 18, which isn't really either, but like we love it and it works well for us. So definitely just choose something that's right for you. And then lastly, use a thesaurus or dictionary. This will come in really helpful for you if you want to like research some terms related to your niche or some alternative words. That will be really helpful. Okay. Sorry, Right, so the fourth thing we wish we knew about blogging was all the legal aspects of running a blog. So firstly is a privacy policy, and now you must have one of these if you're collecting any personal information on your site. So this includes email addresses if you're going to have an email subscription box. Also, if you're taking any comments on your site, if you have those enabled, you'll be taking a name and an email address. So always have a privacy policy, and this should be easy to find. The footer is normally the best place. So in the picture, you can see where ours is on our site, which is at the bottom in the footer. And also we use a draft template from Wordpress, because when we signed up for Wordpress and you have a whole Wordpress dashboard, they have a draft privacy policy template, so that's what we use. And if you use any other blogging platform like Squarespace or Wix, I'm sure they'll have something like that too, but you definitely need a privacy policy, so that's really important. And then the second legal aspect we wish we knew was about copyright. So with copyright, there's two issues. So firstly is you using other people's images without their permission, and secondly, other people using your images without your permission. So to avoid the first one, you using other people's images without their permission, it's always good just to ask for permission. So you could email them, you could drop them a DM, anything, but just make sure you've got written permission to use that image. And if you can't find the original owner, then just don't use the image, because it's not worth the risk. And instead, what we use is a site called Unsplash, and there's others like Getty Images, Shutterstock, Pixels, and they're basically where you can just download images for free, and it's where creators have given you permission already to use those images. So you don't need to ask, they're free to use, which is really good. And then secondly, you want to prevent other people using your images. So what we really recommend for this is to put a copyright notice at the bottom of your blog. So in the footer, along with the privacy policy, put a copyright notice saying how you give permission, whether you do give permission for people to use your content. And also on social media, there's a real problem for people just reposting and not giving clear credit. So if you ever post a photo on social media that you're really proud of and that you want someone to credit you properly when you, if they were to repost it, put a little copyright disclaimer thing in the caption. And there's an example of one of ours that we've done for one of our posts just on the right there. And then at the bottom, this is a link to a article we read on gov.uk all about copyright. We'll pop that in the chat box in a minute, because that's really, really helpful and useful to use about copyright.
Okay, so the fifth thing that we wish we knew about blogging is the importance of social media to generate blog traffic. So we've come up with a few tips we wanted to share with you about our social media journey and what you can take away from that. So tip number one is to, should we just move the slide?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay, so tip number one is to concentrate on 1 to 2 social media platforms. Now, the problem with having an account on every single platform is that one, it's really difficult to maintain and grow and connect with individual audiences, but also, it can end up looking a little bit unprofessional if one of your social media accounts gets a little bit neglected. People might think you're not that serious. So it's much better to concentrate on just a couple of platforms and do it really, really well. And that kind of leads me on to the next point, which is use the right platforms. Now, we think that Pinterest is really overlooked. We started off with a Twitter and a Instagram. Instagram, I think, is a pretty well-known, safe social media for a blog, but it's also very saturated, and it can be quite hard to get people onto your account. But with Pinterest, the kind of users on Pinterest are people that are interested in finding and reading blogs, so you're much more likely to get a higher traffic through Pinterest. We discovered through our site statistics that most of our viewers were coming over from Pinterest as opposed to Instagram. So you can definitely use your stats to see what platforms it is that you should really be concentrating on. But I think Pinterest and Instagram for a blog is a safe way to go. Next, engage with your followers. This is so important, especially as a small blog. You need to be able to build those relationships with your audience. So you can do this through things like polls on Instagram stories, or you can ask questions in your captions of your pictures, or even comment on other people's posts. Reach out to other influencers and see whether you can collaborate or promote each other. But it's really important to engage and talk to people so that they kind of feel some sense of loyalty towards your blog as well. So the next tip is that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So it's really important to be active and consistent to give off a professional impression. And this is definitely difficult to do, especially at the start when you don't have much interaction back from your followers. You might post a picture that you feel really proud of and you've thought a lot about and, perfected your caption, and then you only get a few likes. That can be really demoralizing. But it's so important to be consistent, keep posting, keep engaging, keep asking audience questions, keep doing polls, even if no one's replying at the moment, because it's just that it's only at the moment, and every blogger has gone through that. And as you grow, it becomes really rewarding to be able to see the fruits of all your labor and your hard work and your perseverance, because you will see it if you keep trying. And the next point is to be consistent. So not only be consistent with your uploads, but also be consistent with your theme, with the way your social medias and your blog look. So it's really good to have a theme so that you can, the audience, from different platforms can see that this is your blog. It has the same theme on your website as it does on your Instagram account. And for our theme, we've decided to go with kind of a more relaxing, calming kind of atmosphere, because that's what we want our audience to feel. So it's really important to be consistent across your social media platforms. And the last one is something that we really struggled with, which is that perfectionism can be damaging. So it's really important to put out content that you feel really proud of and that you've really worked hard on. But we found ourselves falling into that trap where we wouldn't post until everything was perfect, or even with our website, we wouldn't put it live until everything was perfect. And this wasted quite a lot of time. And at the end of the day, those first posts, they're not going to get that much interaction anyway. So it was a huge waste of our time, and it kind of made us a little bit fearful of not having everything perfect all at once. So if you've seen our Instagram at all, or our blog, you would see how much we've changed over these past 7 months. Our entire blog has changed, our layout, and then also with our logo, you can see at the top there, we've gone from kind of a more, what we thought was pretty, we loved it at the time, but we just thought it wasn't that legible really, because like Jenny said, our name's quite long, it's quite unusual, so we wanted it to be clearer, the font and everything like that, a little bit more professional. So it's actually really cool for us to be able to look back on how we've grown. So instead of being scared of that change, really embrace it and have that growth mindset, and look back with pride about how far you've come. So those are our social media tips.
we go. So there we go. That's the 5 things we wish we knew about blogging. Just to recap, first of all, start with a niche, then expand. Secondly, don't worry too much about your blog name. It's more about making a name for yourself. And then there's lots of technical aspects of starting a blog. So definitely do your research, particularly on those 4 things we mentioned, and SEO. And then fourthly, make sure you have a privacy policy and learn about copyright laws. They're really important. And lastly, social media is very important to generate traffic to your blog, and particularly with Pinterest. So lastly, just before we go into the Q&A session, we just want to talk a bit about a new series we're working on for our blog called Busy Talking With, where we are going to be interviewing young entrepreneurs all about their journey, their business experience, and just asking them for any advice and tips they have for young people wanting to start their own businesses. So for anyone watching this, if you'd be happy for us to interview you, please contact us, because we'd love to have as many people as possible for this new series. So we popped our contact information on the PowerPoint slide there. Feel free to take a photo and yeah, email or DM us if you would like to be involved in that series. So yeah, thank you so much for coming along to our webinar. It's been so lovely to share some blogging tips with you, and if any of you start a blog, please let us know. Okay, so now we're just going to move on to the Q&A session.